the US has just given us a masterclass in how to completely change politics. The interesting thing is we have just gone from an enormous Conservative majority in 2019 with Boris Johnson to an enormous Labour majority with Keir Starmer. Now, that itself shows the volatility in the system. So people used to say in this country, well, my dad voted Labour, his dad voted Labour. You'll never get an insurgent party breaking through. I say, look at Germany, look at Italy, look at France, look at Sweden. Everywhere you look in European nations, disruptors are breaking through. Because I think we're not just seeing the re-election of Trump. I think what Trump symbolizes is a new chapter in the history of mass democracy. It's a new cultural zeitgeist. Like counterculture is becoming the culture. And I think that's fascinating. And the old left-right split that shaped politics in the 20th century, I think is now completely making way for this new two-dimensional politics where cultural values are really dominant.
All right, Matt Goodwin, let's talk about what's going on with the conservatives in this country, because one of the themes that I've talked to a whole bunch of people about since we've been here at ARC is that the conservatives are better than the liberals here, but are not that great and seem incapable of solving problems. And of course, now there's Nigel Farage's Reform Party. How do you see the landscape there? Do you think that's the proper assessment of what's going on with the conservatives? And what does that look like for Americans that maybe don't pay too much attention to the inner workings of British politics?
Yeah, well, I think Americans should pay a lot of attention because what we've got in the US and the UK is a story about two realignments. You've had the post-2016 Trump realignment, which I think the Republicans made the right choice in leaning into that, and then they dominated the system, and they've really reaped the dividend of that. And here in Britain, we've had the Tory party, which was really given the same kind of realignment after Brexit, could have expanded into working class areas, into small towns, medium towns, could have advocated a proper conservative message, but they chose not to do that. So then they were decimated at the last election in 24. So what we've been left with here...
Why is that? Why did they not lean into that? I think it's hard for people to believe post-Brexit, sort of.
So the thing, you guys had this saying, rhinos, Republicans in name only.
Yeah.
So we have what I would call chinos, conservative in name only, and the Tory parliamentary party is absolutely obsessed with social status, with not engaging in culture wars, with avoiding anything that might make them look bad on the London dinner party circuit. So they were given all of these Brexit voters, right, who are more working class, who are culturally conservative, who said, we want the border secure, we want immigration brought down, we don't believe in this woke stuff that's telling us everything's wrong about British history. But the Tories never really knew what to do with that because they're, London set kind of middle-class wets, basically. They didn't really want to get down with that message. So all realignments are about demand and supply. We had the demand, you guys had the demand, but you also had the supply with Trump. We didn't really have that supply side. So that's why now the British Tories are facing this, I would argue, existential threat from Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, which has now replaced them in the national polls. And this is, for Americans unfamiliar maybe with British politics or watching from afar, like this is really a pivotal moment in the history of our country, because you're talking about the most electorally successful political party, the Tories, in the history of democracy, being replaced by a party that has 15 full-time members of staff, not really a lot of resource, but is on message when it comes to that realignment.
But a guy who's on message and goes to the pubs and goes out into the crowds with the people and knows how to do that. What are the differences between the two parties, actually, beyond just sort of, there seems to be an attitudinal difference, at least?
Well, I would argue the Tory party is a liberal party. So I would argue that Kemi Badenoch, who was speaking here at ARC, it was interesting to me listening to her as she talked about, well, liberalism has got hacked. Okay. Where's the case for conservatism? Like if you take the kind of Yoram Hazony view of the world, what we need fundamentally in the West is not just a sort of reinvented, recycled liberalism. We actually need a new case for conservatism, and we need to make it culturally relevant to new generations. And Kemi Badenoch, what was interesting, she said, look, we need to control the borders, we need to lower migration, but she stopped short of doing things that reform would do, such as leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, which is preventing us from deporting murderers, rapists, killers from our country. It's preventing us from controlling our own borders, from stopping the small boat invasion on the southern border. These
From an
things-
American perspective, by the way, it's very hard for people to understand that you actually cannot do certain things in your own country because of these broader agreements.
It's insane. And the reason, so Americans looking at your southern border, well, you can actually have jurisdiction over that. You can have sovereignty over that. I can see Trump and others moving to do that. We are beholden to supranational conventions and agreements that are stopping us from being able to actually remove foreign offenders from our country and stop those small boats. Now, Kemi Badenoch will not do what needs to be done on that because fundamentally she's not really a radical. She's a Tory, and the Tories basically created the managed decline that everybody in Britain sees around them. And what I'm saying is very similar to what Nigel's saying. We need to completely reshape and realign politics in this country so it's much more in tune with the outlook of the average voter.
So are there any other sort of major policy differences besides reform wants out of these international treaties? Is everything else sort of similar?
I would say there are a number of other key differences. The Tories gave us mass immigration. Boris Johnson gave us mass immigration. He was a Bohemian liberal. He was never a conservative. Reformer utterly committed to ending mass uncontrolled immigration. The Conservatives never did anything on woke. They talk the talk, they don't walk the walk. Reform will overturn woke ideology, DEI, strip it out of the public institutions, a bit like Musk and Trump are doing now. I think Reform are a bit more business savvy. They're actually led by people who have created large-scale businesses. Nobody really on frontline politics has done that. So they're a bit more in favor of cutting tax, pushing back regulation. They're very critical of our government's Chagos deal, and they go much harder than the Tories on the rape gangs and the victims of rape gangs by saying we should be deporting dual nationals who are convicted of raping our kids. So they are, I think, a sort of unfiltered conservative movement, and they can also reach into parts of the Labour areas that Tories can simply never do. So they are Trumpian. I mean, Nigel is obviously very close with Trump. Yeah. He's gone on the campaign trail with Trump. He's learned a lot of the lessons about, using rallies, but also building a team of people. And I think that's what he took away from watching the inauguration. It's not just Trump anymore. It is about Kennedy. It's Elon Musk. It's a kind of crew of people. And I think that's what he's now trying to put into place here.
Yeah, you might find this interesting, but one of my reasons for supporting DeSantis during the primary was that I didn't think Trump was going to be able to build out that team. Yeah. And now he has some of the best people in the world, and I couldn't possibly be more of a supporter. So if Nigel can do that, I think you guys would be in great shape. Are you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, although DeSantis made the cardinal mistake of backing Kemi Badenoch, which I always thought was, for a guy who was saying, we need a new conservatism, because that's basically what we're all talking about. I was struck that he would back somebody who had presided over the wholesale liberalization of immigration.
So are you surprised that this is the state of Britain right now?
No, I've been talking about the realignment for 15 years. I was probably the first person in the country to say to the Conservatives pre-Brexit, this is the future of conservatism in terms of the electorate. When the vote for Brexit happened, I was probably the only academic. I was a university professor in my former life. I was the only academic saying Britain was going to vote for Brexit. And then when it happened, I was saying to the Conservatives, this is a historic, unique opportunity now for you to realign your party and the people who are voting for you around this new zeitgeist. And I briefed Boris Johnson and told him exactly how he should do that. What happened then was, as we know, the opposite. And so really over the last 5-6 years, like many people here, I've become desperately concerned about the state of our country, and I've become much more involved with Reform, not as a member, but speaking at their events, because what I can see happening, look, I think we have 2 general elections to really save this country. Maybe just one, but I think probably we have 2. And by save, I mean get Reform to 32% of the vote, win a majority, and enact the wholesale repudiation of the consensus that has been dominating Britain for the last 30 years. And by that, I mean big immigration, big state, big tax, big debt, big spending, big woke. And I don't think there's ever been as much of an opportunity as there is today to do that.
So the 32%, that's not a technical number. That's just the number you think you would need basically to get enough to form a coalition.
No, that's the number Reform need for a majority. That's like going into number 10,
Yeah.
saying, okay, we're going to completely turn this thing over. Now to get there, they need to completely decimate the Tories, which they're doing. As you and I sit here today, the Tories are on 20% in the polls on average. Reform are averaging 27. Okay, they need to decimate the Tories, and they need to take a big chunk of that working class Labour vote, or like I guess you'd call them Blue Democrats.
Right.
They need to eat into those working class heartlands, take some of those. And look,
it's literally what Trump did. It's
exactly.
just what Trump did.
Exactly. And the funny thing about it is, to Americans looking at Britain, because some of Trump's team came over recently and they said, God, I haven't been in London for 10 years. What has happened to this country? And these were serious people. They said it wasn't just the immigration, it's just the way in which your leaders seem to hate your own people. And I think what's so fascinating about Britain now and worrying is, if you look ahead, the only thing this country has really is managed decline. We've got low growth rates, we've got spiraling debt, we don't have a strategy to revive our economy, we've just got spiraling immigration, we've got flat birth rates, declining birth rates among the British, and we've got about 10 million more people projected to come into Britain over the next 20 years, and they're all going to come from outside Europe.
Yeah.
So there won't be cultural cohesion. Most of those people will be coming from Nigeria, Pakistan, China, Vietnam. How do you build, to go back to the Robert Putnam question, how do you build a functional, integrated, cohesive nation on that basis, right? What you end up with is a low trust country where everyone just hunkers down and nobody's really contributing to the collective pot. So I'm very gloomy, but within that chaos will come an opportunity to radically reshape politics.
And that's basically why you think that it's 2 at most. It seems to me like it's probably 1 election cycle.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? The remarkable thing, I mean, again, the US has just given us a masterclass in how to completely change politics. The interesting thing is we have just gone from an enormous Conservative majority in 2019 with Boris Johnson to an enormous Labour majority with Keir Starmer. Now, that itself shows the volatility in the system. So people used to say in this country, well, my dad voted Labour, his dad voted Labour. You'll never get an insurgent party breaking through. I say, look at Germany, look at Italy, look at France, look at Sweden. Everywhere you look in European nations, disruptors are breaking through. Because I think we're not just seeing the re-election of Trump. I think what Trump symbolizes is a new chapter in the history of mass democracy. It's a new cultural zeitgeist. Like, counterculture is becoming the culture. I think that's fascinating. And the old left-right split that shaped politics in the 20th century, I think, is now completely making way for this new 2-dimensional politics where cultural values are really dominant. It's not to say economics doesn't matter, because of course it does, but cultural values are becoming so much more dominant. So these issues over free speech, over the compatibility of Islam with Western nations, border security, the scale of migration. As Samuel Huntington asked, who are we? And I think that's a question many people in Europe are asking, certainly many people in Britain are asking, who are we? And he said, well, in relation to America, it was funny rereading that book last month. He said, Americans are based on distinctive values, and those values are under threat through large-scale Hispanic, Latino immigration, and a political elite that doesn't believe in its own country. I kind of wish Huntington was still alive, because I would say, well, hang on, the Hispanics and Latinos are voting for Trump.
Yeah.
So you got that one
Trust
wrong.
me, I live in Miami. I'm
Right?
in Hispanic town.
Exactly.
These are the most America-loving, freedom-loving people.
So he got that bit wrong. But
Right.
what he got right was what we now call the woke elite.
Right.
The self-bashing, self-hating, West-loathing political elite. And if you look at Europe, I think that's why J.D. Vance's speech struck a chord with the European people. He irritated the elites, but the people got it.
Yeah.
Because what he was saying is, you are now in the hands of an elite class that is using censorship to suppress your free speech, is imposing mass immigration on you, is eroding your borders, and is no longer standing up for those shared values that Huntington talked about, the values of Western civilization. And that's why so many elites found it so annoying that he gave that speech, because they know what we know, which is that the forgotten majority were nodding along saying, yeah, that guy's got it right.
Well, we're happy to send our VP over to the shores over here to do some damage so you guys can clean it up. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the chat. Yeah.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
We've imported some very dangerous people, some violent men from violent places, and instead of requiring them to assimilate to the values of the settled population, we've told everyone else that we have to adapt to the intolerant newcomers. And hence, for example, we've now had 2 cases of people being arrested for burning Qurans. Now, honestly, I can't see why anyone would want to burn a Quran. I think it's an oafish and obnoxious thing to do, but it's not an illegal thing to do. And do
you think someone would be arrested for burning the Bible here?
It's very difficult to imagine it, right? Because what's happened is that, in effect, the kind of DEI training of the police is now taking precedent over parliamentary statute, because there's no law that says you can't destroy your own private property, right? So there's no legal basis for this. It's a very tendentious interpretation of public order. But what it really is that we have sacralized the hurt feelings of certain protected groups, even when, as in this case, some of the people offended are themselves deeply intolerant.
All right, so what are you making of the ARC conference?
It's wonderful to have all these people. It's wonderful to have a celebration of free speech, right? We've been boiled like a frog. It's been like the lockdowns, you know.
You guys are really getting boiled, yeah.
Right, and it's quite refreshing, a bit like at J.D. Vance's speech in Munich, right? It's quite refreshing just to have somebody setting out quite how far we've come. And you're thinking, hang on, when did we agree to this? When was there ever a national debate where we agreed to limit speech because we've elevated, above every other goal of policy, the imagined sensitivities of certain protected groups?
So what is going on in this country as it pertains to free speech? You know, we see the videos on Twitter of police showing up at doors because people posted memes and things like that. And from an American perspective, sometimes I see these videos and I don't share them immediately because I'm like, this can't be real. And yet it's been a big theme here.
See, I think the American perspective has really helped here. The poet Burns has that famous line, "Would some power the gifty gie us to see ourselves as ever see us," right? It's when people see the shock that is being caused by literally people being sent to prison for saying nasty things online at the same time that violent criminals are being released to free up space for them, that they think, wait a minute, you know, this isn't just about being kind. This isn't just about being sensitive. We've become a much more authoritarian society. You know, we went through the Second World War. We went through the Cold War, believing that freedom and free speech and free association set us apart from the other side. And then having won, we've thrown it all out of the window.
So as a British conservative, one of the things in my 48 hours here has been that a lot of the conversations have been around people saying they want the conservatives to be better. I think there's a lot of conservatives here or old school liberals here that usually vote conservative, let's say, and they just don't think the conservatives are doing enough. Well, what do you make of that critique?
Well, I mean, look, we could all be better, right? I mean, that should be a standard aspiration at all times. But it is always difficult for a party to struggle with things that are in the past. If people say, I'm not going to vote for you because of what your party did 10 years ago, you can't change that. Right? You can only protest that you're different. Imagine if people have said, I'm never going to vote for that woman Thatcher because of what Edward Heath did, right? I'm never going to vote for Reagan because of Ford. I mean, it's actually a slightly odd way of thinking, and yet it's a very natural way for people to respond. And so I think we just need to show that the failures of the past government are associated with the people of the past government, and we've moved on.
So immigration seems to be the big one here and across Europe. What is the conservative position on immigration, and do you think that it will attract enough people to make the party bigger?
Well, there has been too much too quickly. And as a result, we've imported some very dangerous people, some violent men from violent places. And instead of requiring them to assimilate to the values of the settled population, we've told everyone else that we have to adapt to the intolerant newcomers. And hence, for example, we've now had 2 cases of people being arrested for burning Qurans. Now, honestly, I can't see why anyone would want to burn a Quran. I think it's an oafish and obnoxious thing to do, but it's not an illegal thing to do. And
do you think someone would be arrested for burning the Bible here?
It's very difficult to imagine it, right? Because what's happened is that, in effect, the kind of DEI training of the police is now taking precedent over parliamentary statute, because there's no law that says you can't destroy your own private property, right? So there's no legal basis for this. It's a very tendentious interpretation of public order. But what it really is that we have sacralized the hurt feelings of certain protected groups, even when, as in this case, some of the people offended are themselves deeply intolerant. So I was astonished by that case in Sweden, where somebody burnt a Quran, was murdered, right? Was murdered by extremists, and the response of the authorities was to say, "Let's stop this Quran burning." Right? If we don't offend these cry bullies in the first place, then maybe they won't have to murder you.
Do you think Europe can get out of this problem? Because obviously it's not just in your borders, it's in Sweden, it's in many of these other countries. We've been through Charlie Hebdo already and seen sort of the reverse reaction that you would have thought the liberals would have stood up for free speech, etc. But so you do believe?
I'm much more optimistic. Not really about, so the problem with liberals in every sense, both in the American and in the classical sense, is that they saw this primarily as a racial issue. So people who would have normally been very, very strongly for secularism and secularization, because religious minorities happened not to be white in large part, threw all of their normal assumptions aside and approached it in terms of race relations. But the good news, and this is very, very rarely reported either here or in the US, is the extent to which there is a backlash within those communities. I was in the European Parliament for 21 years. I had several 100,000, mainly Pakistani Kashmiri constituents. Their single biggest complaint as Muslims, right? I mean, they had the same complaints as everyone else about healthcare and whatever. But when they were talking as Muslims, the single biggest complaint they had was the way these kind of bearded weirdos were held up as representative of their community. And I think it's,
what can be done about that? I mean, that has to come from their community.
Right. But also the rest of us can give a lead, right? The government needs to be very, very clear. And when I say the government, I mean local government, schools, the whole institution, the apparatus of the state needs to be much clearer about saying, we will support you if you are against this kind of extremism. We will support the decent heads of families who are trying to prevent their kids falling into strange ways. I mean, this isn't really new for us, David. If you go back 100 years, 80% of British subjects were neither white nor Christian. Right? In the two great wars of the 20th century, millions of non-white and non-Christian young men volunteered to fight, crossing half the world to take up arms for a country they'd never set foot in many cases, right? Because they believed in the values that elevated our civilization, including free speech, free contract, free association, all the rest of it, right? What's changed? What is it that we've taught their grandchildren? Yeah. Well, if their grandchildren or great-grandchildren got any history at all in school, it was presented to them as a hateful chronicle of racism and exploitation. So is it any wonder that some of them respond to the education they've had? Right? It's because we have lost confidence in our values. And that's why I think this is a soluble problem. But the first step is recovering our self-belief.
Why do you think that the UK seemingly has been unable to defend those incredible principles? Is it just because the liberals thought of this as a racial argument and not a sort of civilizational struggle or something else? Were there any other pieces there?
So I think that's the single biggest thing. Anti-racism became like a religious value. But don't underestimate, as this interview is demonstrating, the extent to which the US and the rest of the Anglosphere are a single cultural space. We imported some terrible ideas from some liberal colleges in the US. The BLM movement got, I think somebody worked out, 28 times more coverage on the BBC than the rape gangs in the Northern English cities.
And then you were having BLM protests in London where your police don't even have guns.
Right. White British BLM protesters shouting, hands up, don't shoot, right? And unarmed metropolitan cops, right? And but not just that. I blame the West Wing for this, right? We all think, all politicos here think that they're Americans. You hear these bizarre phrases being used. We see the whole racial issue through basically an American prism. right? Even down to the fact that it was BLM. Black people are not our main racial minority here. It's 4% of our population, right? The South Asian people are a much bigger minority. But we think that Selma and segregation was somehow our story. So if you're a white conservative, they call you a Klansman. If you're a black conservative, they call you an apart from being unbelievably rude, what's any of this got to do with us, right? But the good news is that just as the terrible ideas spilled out from the US and infected Canada, Australia, and Britain much more badly than the rest of the world, so I think that the backlash is also part of that single cultural space. I say the rest of the world kind of adapted it, right? In Canada, it took the form of the pretended Indigenous genocide and the kids in the boarding schools. In Australia, it took the form of the Indigenous voice to Parliament. In Britain, we just pretended that we were part of, we pretended we were in Mississippi, right? And, crazy. And conducted. Now, there comes a moment with all of these moral panics when the sensible people just shake their heads and wake up and say, hang on, wait a minute. You're saying what? Hey, how is this helpful? And a thing that always really bothered me during the British BLM moment, nobody thought about the impact it was having on black British kids growing up. Imagine that you're a small child, maybe preschool. You're just kind of catching this on the news at the periphery of your vision. You don't really understand what it is. But you would grow up thinking that the police are going to shoot at someone who looks like you. And we've imported this for no benefit at all. We treat black British people as like props in somebody else's story, in a story that's fundamentally aimed at guilty white people, right? And nobody stopped to think, what is the impact? I mean, if you were trying to create mental health problems,
unless they were doing exactly what they were trying to do, which
I think that credits them with too much strategic intelligence. I think this was just fashion, right? And my youngest was 4 years old. He had a couple of black friends at school. Whenever I was watching this stuff on TV, I was thinking, how does it, if you're trying to induce anxiety and depression in someone, you tell them that it doesn't matter what they do, that they're doomed because everyone is out to get them. Like it's the opposite of behavioral therapy, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And yet we were doing this in this kind of self-indulgent spasm.
Let me ask you from a British perspective on what's going on in America right now. My sense for most of the people here is that everyone's kind of thrilled with what's happening in America for the last month. What's your take?
I mean, look, yes and no, right? So I love the deregulation. I love the Doge. I think Elon Musk is great. I've got to say, I'm not wild about making territorial claims on other NATO countries, right? The international order has rested on the idea that you don't change borders by force.
What do you think of the general concept of let the countries pay their fair share?
I agree with that.
Not have America free the bill, yeah.
And I've argued that for a long time. But it's very difficult to condemn a Chinese attack on Taiwan or a Putinite attack on Ukraine if at the same time you're claiming Panama or Greenland, right? Sure. The principles that we have taken for granted, you and I have grown up with, and that we've taken for granted, had a particular birth, right? They came from a time and place. They came from the Atlantic Charter, from Newfoundland in 1941. And the idea that you should peacefully arbitrate disputes, although it's been flouted, has never been jettisoned until now. And that really does worry me.
Any final thoughts or any other expectations for the conference for the next day or so?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I'm very keen on, and which I hope comes out. One underexplored opportunity that we have, Britain having left the EU and now Biden being out, is a closer trade relationship between our two countries. I detect that this is something that the president wants. We actually got quite far with it until 2020 when Biden stopped all trade talks. And we then, COVID came along. But I think there is now an opportunity to pick up from where we were. No two countries are more economically compatible. 1 million Brits every day turn up to work for American-owned companies. 1 million Americans every day clock into work for British-owned companies. You are our biggest investor. We are your biggest investor. What hasn't followed until now has been the trade, because for the last 50 years, our trade was controlled by the European Union. We now have the opportunity to create a larger market among compatible civilizations with fairly similar GDP. We're not going to have a brain drain in either direction. And it is a lever-marked growth that works for both countries and has really no downside at all. So I think this is one of the things that we could really profitably get out of this administration.
We shall see. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Very nice to be here, Dave.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.
So, just to give you a sense for what's happened, this all began in 2020. In the last 5 years, hundreds of victims have come forward. Now there's lawsuits on behalf of nearly 300 victims and 25 lawsuits suing Pornhub, including class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. They've been criminally charged by the U.S. government. They've lost all credit card processing. Visa, MasterCard, and Discover cut them off. They actually had to take down 91% of the entire website. Had to be taken down in what Financial Times called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history.
All right, so we are here at the ARC conference, and I've been talking to all sorts of political leaders and thinkers and philosophers and all of those types about the civilizational struggle that we're in. You come at it from a slightly different place, from really focusing on human trafficking and pornography, but that fits within this civilizational struggle that we're going through. So I guess first, how did you get involved in all of that? And then we'll
in the context, yeah, sure. In the context of now 18 years in the fight against sex trafficking, about 5 years ago, I was investigating the intersection between what I call the big porn industry and sex trafficking and child sexual abuse, and was paying attention to the headlines and heard some really horrific stories of child abuse that was taking place on Pornhub. It was being monetized and globally distributed, and specifically the case of a 15-year-old girl from Florida who was missing for an entire year, and she was finally found when her distraught mother was tipped off by a Pornhub user that he recognized her daughter on the site. And she was found in 58 videos being raped for profit on Pornhub. And so in the context of my work, I asked a question. How in the world was this happening? And it wasn't just that victim, it was numerous victims that we were hearing about. And it was a question of how did this happen? And I began to look at the big porn tube sites. These are the YouTubes of porn. I tested the upload system by, recording the rug and in my room and the keyboard and uploaded, and found out that they were not verifying age or consent. So anybody anywhere in the world could upload a sex video to Pornhub in under 10 minutes. Only an email address was required. No ID.
So literally no controls. So
No control.
A 15-year-old kid themselves could be uploading this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they were.
Now, I assume that's against whatever their terms of service might be, but that doesn't stop anyone.
It was just a show, right? It was the fine print terms of service, check a box here, but it was a free-for-all, and that's how the site actually became infested with videos of real sexual crime. And I felt like we need to sound the alarm on this, because it was Pornhub, but it was also its sister sites that were owned by the same parent company. These are some of the most popular porn tube sites in the world are owned by this company: RedTube, GayTube, YouPorn, XTube, ExtremeTube, on and on and on. And these sites are infested with real sexual crime. And so we had to really sound the alarm on what was going on.
So as you guys uncover some of this stuff, what is the response from PornTube and the parent company as it relates to, putting aside what someone might feel about porn in general, which I would like to discuss with you, as it relates to child porn? I mean, I don't know any sane person that thinks that is okay, so.
Right. Well, they were kind of deflecting. So as all this was coming to light, there was some traction, a lot of traction around, calling them out for what was happening. I was able to start a petition that started to go viral. We got, 2.3 million signatures from every country in the world. And as this was happening, victims were coming forward on a regular basis, and whistleblowers from inside the company were coming forward to reveal the inner workings of how this all happened. The media started to pay attention. Hundreds of articles began to be written about this, and their response, instead of to recognize that there was a serious problem, was to try to deflect, was try to do crazy PR stunts to try to take the attention away from what was actually going on. But we kept at it, and happy to say that we've made a lot of progress in holding them accountable for the mass distribution of sexual crime. So, just to give you a sense for what's happened, this all began in 2020. In the last 5 years, hundreds of victims have come forward. Now there's lawsuits on behalf of nearly 300 victims and 25 lawsuits suing Pornhub, including class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. They've been criminally charged by the U.S. government. They've lost all credit card processing. Visa, MasterCard, and Discover cut them off. They actually had to take down 91% of the entire website. Had to be taken down in what Financial Times called probably the biggest takedown of content in internet history.
Wow. So 91% of the content was underage?
It was unverified. So
Yeah.
they had no idea whether this was a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, whether it was rough sex or rape, whether it was consensually recorded and non-consensually uploaded. And what we understood was the site was actually infested with illegal content.
Right.
And so that is why they had to take down that much content. They went from 56 million pieces of content in 2020 to 5.2 million today.
Wow.
And we're not done yet because there's still unverified content on the site.
So that's going after the distributor in effect. But what about the people? Now, I assume some of it is just, in essence, kids uploading it themselves. And then there's obviously some legal issues there. I don't know if you go after parents or something like that. And then what about the people that are actually involved in trafficking and getting these kids involved in it?
Yes. So we believe in accountability. We need justice to be served in order to deter future abusers. And that includes those who are actually uploading the content. In this case, this is a free porn tube site. The ones that are actually profiting from and doing the most damage in this case with regard to distribution is the site itself. Because, at the time in 2020, they had 170 million visits per day. They had 56 billion visits that year. They had enough content uploaded every year. It would take 169 years to watch if you put those videos back to back. And so what victims say, it's one thing to be raped, right? But then that's filmed and then it's uploaded to the mainstream site on the surface web like Pornhub, where millions of people had an opportunity to download that content. So they had a download button on every single video, and to download that content, then to re-upload it again and again and again, where they understood the worst moment of their life would live in perpetuity online forever.
So this is going to sound naive or something, but who are they being raped by? Like, these are traffickers that are getting basically young kids in essence, and don't they think they're going to be caught? I mean,
well, they could anonymously upload. So they could even use a VPN to upload. So at the time, could be impossible to actually locate them. There was some who were uploading and they were even, verifying themselves as uploaders to monetize the content on Pornhub. So I'll give you an example. There was a man named Rocky Shea Franklin in Alabama, and he had drugged and overpowered a 12-year-old boy. And he filmed the assaults of this little boy, and he uploaded 23 of those videos to Pornhub with titles that actually indicated that this was abuse. Like, Uncle's Secret and Young Ass's Best. I mean, titles that would clearly show that this was abuse. And he verified himself. So he actually showed his ID, and they actually apprehended him, and he's in prison for 40 years for what he did. But Pornhub, that globally distributed, police actually went after Pornhub and demanded that they take those videos down, and they were ignored for 7 months while that boy's rape videos were downloaded and uploaded and got hundreds of thousands of views.
So how is it that Pornhub is still up at this point if they've done so much clearly illegal stuff? I mean, it doesn't sound like they're hiding it to that.
Well, the wheels of justice turn slowly. I mean, but they are turning, and thankfully, 91% of the site has been taken down, and they've faced serious repercussions. I mean, the CEO and the COO were forced to resign. The secret majority shareholder was exposed. They're personally being sued. That little boy that I just mentioned, he's now 18, and he's suing the company along with many other victims. And the company was actually sold as a distressed asset because of the repercussions of what's happened. But we're not done yet because we want to see justice fully served. And what that means is, justice to the full extent of the law, both criminally and civilly. And that's so important to be a deterrent to future abusers.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, for these corporate traffickers, is what I call them, it's a risk-benefit calculation for them. And we have to increase risk and then eliminate profitability. And when we do that, we're going to see a transformation of this industry to make the internet a safer place.
Do you see any of the controls that they're putting in as working? I'm in Florida, where now I think you have to have an ID to go on some of these sites. that at least provides some protection, I suppose, on the user end. That's not doing anything on the end that you're talking about. But I assume you find some value in some of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, children are being exploited in front of the screen and they're being exploited behind the screen, and victims are being exploited on both sides for profit, because the business model of free user-generated porn is to sell ad impressions. So it's all about traffic. That's what they care about the most, is content and traffic.
Have you guys gone for the advertisers too?
They have no mainstream legitimate advertisers anymore. Nobody will, even KY Jelly is Astroglide will not advertise. I mean, they even had, at one point, they had Kraft Heinz Unilever advertising. They were called out. They stopped. So, they don't have legitimate mainstream advertisers anymore, thank goodness, because that's another repercussion of what's happened. They've lost mainstream business partners. But the business model relies on selling 4.6 billion ad impressions every single day on Pornhub. And that's why they need that traffic. But I think these controls are important because children have free access to the site too, right? Where their sex education as young as 8, 9, 10, 11 years old is not just violent, hardcore, legal pornography, but is actually crime scenes that they're witnessing from such a young age that's shaping their sexual template for life, which is really harmful. So the solution at scale for this issue is age and consent verification. So we need age verification for those who are accessing the site, just like, you said Florida has done, Texas has done. Currently, the Supreme Court is hearing and going to decide whether it's okay for states to implement age verification to protect children. But we also need age and consent verification for those who are in those user-generated porn videos as well. Right. And when that happens, then you're going to see this prevented on these sites.
What do you think of the argument when the Florida thing happened? I read an article that I thought was an interesting philosophical point that the verification should be done at the user end, meaning it should be done by the parents on the device rather than putting it on the site, because the site can only control that site. But if the parents were fully involved, and kids are smart and they can always get around things, I fully accept that. But if the parent were fully involved in paying attention to what's on the kid's phone or what access was there, that probably is really the only way to deal with it.
I don't agree with that's the only way. I say both and. When we think about safety, like when we're driving a car, right? We have a seatbelt, we have a roll bar, we have airbags, we have many different ways that we try to protect ourselves in that situation. I think the same thing could apply to protecting kids from porn exposure. I mean, that's one line of defense, but it doesn't work all the time. And I mean, there's a lot of children that don't have attentive parents that are able to watch them 24/7, that even could take the time to understand the technology for device level of verification of age. And again, kids are smart. They can get around that. So I think we need that, but we also need age verification at the site level, third-party age verification, because I would never want anybody to hand over an ID to a porn site like
Right.
Pornhub.
So that the article that I read was basically arguing that then, okay, congratulations, you've just handed them your ID.
Well, we have third party. So
right.
I think that fear is based on a misconception about how this could actually happen and what technology we have available to safely, with respect to privacy, be able to verify age on a site like that. So we have third party companies. I mean, one of them is called Yoti. And in 1 second, they can do a biometric facial scan that doesn't even store the actual photo of a person, but uses pixels and numbers. And that technology is trained on thousands, if not millions of other faces. And they can determine in 1 second with over 99% accuracy, the age of a person that would be using the site. They can store that as a token, and that could be used on multiple adult sites. And so, we have ability like that to be able to age verify. And it's not a huge inconvenience for an adult to go through that in order to protect countless children from exposure to this kind of content.
So in your vision of a future that would, let's say, make sense through the lens that you're talking about this, you'd have the processes like you just described on both ends, meaning the user end and the corporate end, or whatever you want to call that. And then basically you're okay with pornography existing.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's when it's legal and it's consensual really, truly consensual. For me, that's none of my business. My work is to protect children from access and to protect victims and children from being exploited in that content. In the United States, pornography, if it's done that way, is legal, right? And it's constitutionally protected. So, for me, that's none of my business. To each his own in that regard. But we need to, for sure, draw the red line, ensuring the best safeguards that we possibly can to ensure that children are not being exposed to this content.
Is the biggest hurdle you have to face that nobody wants to talk about this because it's kind of embarrassing and weird and sex is uncomfortable to talk about and everything else?
It's one of them. I mean, people are uncomfortable talking about porn and talking about rape and trafficking and child abuse and all of these things. And I think that does allow this to continue kind of hidden in the shadows. I mean, that's why Pornhub was purchased for $2,750 in 2007 is when it launched online. By 2020, it was the 5th most visited website in the world. And this entire time, victims were being exploited for profit. It was hidden in plain sight. And it wasn't until 2020 that this began to get attention and traction so that we can actually hold those responsible to account and help stop this in the future. And I think it's partly because of what you just said, is that people are scared to talk about it. I mean, the interesting thing is that it may feel like it's this quiet corner of the internet, but it's such a huge swath of it, right? And most people have been, exposed to it or consumers of it, but afraid to talk about it. A lot of people, even struggle with compulsive porn use that they don't want to talk about because they're embarrassed or there's shame involved with that as well. And that's a huge problem, especially for, young people who are growing up on exposure to pornography. And so, yeah, I think it's a huge issue in society, but it's definitely not talked about enough. And we need to kind of break those barriers and just be able to discuss this because it's really affecting so many lives.
Let me ask you one other thing, and then we'll finish this up on the main stage. So I don't want to ask you everything right now. But do you see a difference in attitudes as it relates to some of these controls when it comes to America versus Europe?
Interesting. I mean, there's a movement. I feel like there's a movement now that it's not just in the United States, but we've seen it in Canada and the UK, and I've seen it across Europe for specifically protecting kids from accessing this content. Unfortunately, I haven't also seen the same passion for implementing the controls we need for those who are in the videos. I don't think people quite understand the dangers of user-generated pornographic content where these sites are getting infested with illegal content. But I think we'll get there, but at least it's a start. I see a huge, 17 states in the United States have implemented age verification for users. We're seeing that push in the UK. We're seeing it in Germany and France and Canada. So I think that there's this kind of global movement to understand the harms and try to protect against it.
We will continue this on the main stage shortly.
If you're looking for an unfiltered lens into the world of tomorrow, go check out our tech playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell. All right, everybody, this is the Rubin Report. I'm Dave Rubin. It's March 27th, 2025. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, on Locals. I know you've tapped that notification bell, so I don't even need to finish this. Yeah, you got it. We got a Rubin Report Locals community Q&A. We did not have a post-game show yesterday because I was on Piers Morgan immediately after the show, and we can't have a post-game show today because I got to get over to New York because I'm on the #1 show in late night, Greg Gutfeld, or Gutfeld with an exclamation point, tonight and tomorrow's show because I'm on Jesse Waters and I think Fox and Friends and a whole bunch of other media stuff in New York. Tomorrow's 11 a.m. show should be the highlights of Gutfeld. Thank you for bearing with us. I promise you some good laughs. I can already guarantee it in advance. I'm going to poke and noodle that little Greg Gutfeld guy. So we got a couple stories of the week that are we're not doing hardcore politics today. It's going to be a little bit of stuff from overseas. And then is there going to be a Islamic mega city in Texas? We'll find out. That's what we're doing on the Rubin Report today. All right, so we showed you the video last week of Conor McGregor, current MMA legend, former MMA fighter, at the White House, really making the case for Ireland being for the Irish. I know that that's very controversial, you know, a pot of gold, a leprechaun, a rainbow, a Guinness, that sort of thing. Not necessarily a place that should just be overrun with immigrants from the Middle East and from Africa. It's really not controversial to say that. There's nothing wrong with fair-skinned white people. How you doing, Connor? Good to see you, as always. Check this out from Inevitable West. Breaking: Ireland's Director of Public Prosecutions is now considering charging Conor McGregor with incitement for hatred for posts he made on X back in 2023. He could face up to 2 years in prison. This is Trump-style legal warfare and blatant election interference. So we've been through all of this, guys. We've been through this many, many times here in the United States with Donald Trump. And now it appears that it's happening to Conor McGregor in Ireland. These are posts that he put up years ago. Clearly, nobody was looking into these posts until he shows up at the White House. Kind of implies he's going to announce a run for president, then announces it, I think the next day, maybe 2 days later. Conor McGregor tweeted this. I'll even try to do it in an Irish accent. "Fact! For the people of Ireland, I stand my ground. May our truth never be silenced. The fact is, if there is 7 years of zero resistance inside Áras un Toran towards government, Ireland is done for. Magnify where we are right now times 7,000. I would prefer to sail my yachts than have to approach the soulless, colourless combines of Dale Ireland every day. But if I do not, I am well aware of Ireland's fate, and I will never let that happen. Vote McGregor. The future of our country depends on it. Where's me freaking shillelagh?" No, it was a little Scottish. Kind of worked. Yeah. So people are all focused on this now, and they're going, well, what the hell is happening in Ireland? Like, it's interesting. If you think of all the different countries in the world, okay, Spain is for Spanish people, Britain's for British people. And we know that these things have largely changed. And how do you define what your country is and what your culture is and all of that? There's something about Ireland. You think of the rolling greens and the golf courses and the beer and the leprechauns. Like, it seems pretty straightforward. There's a country for Irish people. Not to say black people can't live there or religious minorities or anything else. But like, it seems like a kind of straightforward one. Like, if you're kind of pale, you got reddish hair, you're good to go. However, it's changing. Here's some video of Ireland's St. Patrick's Day festival just last week. All right, so look, it's nice to see some people wearing green, but you've got all kinds of different flags. You've got all kinds of different garb. Remember, Ireland is not a melting pot the way America is. I like the Irish healthcare workers for Palestine. How do they feel about the Irish traditions and culture? You have to wonder. So that, in essence, is a visual example of what Conor McGregor is fighting against. And no, it does not mean that he is racist or anything like that. Tracy O'Mahony, who's an ex-political commentator, wrote this. In June 2024, the Irish government voted to opt Ireland into the EU Migration and Asylum Pact against the wishes of the Irish people. Ireland has until June of 26 to pass the necessary laws needed to enact the pact. Since June of 2024, there has been silence from the government regarding the pact. Less than 1 week ago, Conor McGregor stood on the world stage and declared that Ireland has a mass, unvetted, uncontrolled immigration problem, and that should he run and be elected president of Ireland, he would do all in his power to challenge the pact. Today, the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, has secured government approval to submit Ireland's national implementation plan for the EU Asylum and Migration Pact to the European Commissioner, with Minister of State for Migration, Colm Brophy, stating that we are not waiting for June 26 to make changes to our systems. Be under no doubt that the government are running scared, because if Conor McGregor secures a nomination needed to run for the presidency, and if he can run on an immigration platform, he stands a good chance of being elected the next president of Ireland. So what is the answer? The government will do everything in their power to remove debate around the EU Migration Pact by endeavoring to pass all of the necessary laws before November 2025. This government is rotten to the core. So you see what's happening here. It's the same thing that we're seeing in so many of these countries, whether it's Britain or France or partially what we even had to do here in America, certainly what's going on in Canada. The native people of a country who wish to have Western values and who wish to maintain their culture and everything else don't want to just be overrun with people and have to live under the whims and wishes of unelected bureaucrats that live somewhere in Brussels. It's not much more complicated than that, and it doesn't make anyone racist, and it's just fine if an Irishman wants to go to the pub with his shillelagh, have a Guinness, and, smack around his wife after. Or maybe not that part, but you know what I'm saying. Conor McGregor tweeted this, against the wishes of the Irish people, modus operandi of a government that has long since abandoned the voices of its people, the people of Ireland. Everything said in the White House, true, and we fight, fight, fight. Hey guys, let's get real for a sec. Anyone else feel like they're drowning under credit card bills, personal loans, or maybe even some leftover medical debt? It's like no matter how hard you work, your money's just slipping away to lenders instead of staying with you. I've been there and it's exhausting. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to stay this way, and that's where PDS Debt comes in. PDS Debt isn't just about managing your debt, it's about taking charge of it. Their platform digs into your specific financial situation, not some one-size-fits-all nonsense, and builds a plan that's tailored just for you. But they're not here to slap a Band-Aid on it. They're about finding a path to financial freedom that actually works with your life. And get this, no minimum credit score required. Whether your credit's taken a beating or it's just okay, PDS Debt is ready to help you save more, knock out that debt faster, and finally start building up your savings again. Here's what you need to do. Get started at pdsdebt.com/Rubin to complete your free debt assessment to see what options are available to you. Every day you wait, it's costing you money. Get started with your free debt analysis in just 30 seconds at pdsdebt.com/Rubin. That's pdsdebt.com/Rubin. Take back control by visiting pdsdebt.com/Rubin. You've got this. Let's make it happen. And we thought this was interesting. Here's just a guy that was going around. He appears to be a local Irish journalist, going around talking to people about Conor McGregor and the immigration problems and much more. And this is just a regular lady. And yeah.
Would you support Conor McGregor if he were to become the president of Ireland?
Yes, I would definitely support Conor McGregor. What Conor McGregor said in the White House last week was extremely accurate and very, very true of how the people of Ireland, North and South, feel about illegal mass migration. Now, I fully understand that we've all made mistakes, and some people might say Conor's made a mistake in the past. Well, guess what? So have I. I've made a lot of them. It doesn't mean that what I say today is not true. And he was speaking facts.
Do you think Conor McGregor is the last chance for Ireland before they go too far in the wrong direction?
I'll tell you this. I'm frightened for the direction that we're going in, and we need a real big change, and I think it has to be something like the Donald Trump in America, and Conor McGregor, from what I can see, is maybe our best hope.
First off, that woman's great. She wants to run for politics here in America. Come on over, lady. Get on board. Yes, we've all made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. It does not mean the truth that Conor McGregor or she is laying out today is wrong. What was his name? Nick Shirley? Nick Shirley is the name of the guy, by the way, who was doing that interview there. And again, none of this has anything to do with racism. What they're realizing is they're losing their country. And now I want to connect this to something that's happening here in America. This story is really, really wild. So in Plano, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas, and Texas, obviously a huge, huge state. There's an awful lot of land. They're doing an awful lot of building there. And it's one of, the big three states, I would say, Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, that all of the blue state people are fleeing to. Well, there have been plans put into place for a giant Islamic mega city. But don't take my word for it. Take this guy's word for it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, I'm sure many of you have heard of the amazing project that we're doing known as Epic Cities. We are, alhamdulillah, constructing an entire city half an hour from downtown Dallas, literally 30 minutes from our own Plano Masjid over here. It's going to be a city of over 1,000 people. Alhamdulillah, we launched this website last year and we sold the entire phase 1 within days. Because of the demand, we are now opening up Epic Ranches. Epic Ranches is an exclusive opportunity for those who want to be within minutes of Epic City, but also want larger plots. We have 2 Epic Ranches. Epic Ranches 1 begins with 1 acreage and goes up to 5 acreage. And Epic Ranches 2 has plots of ½ acre and also investment opportunities for those who want to build condominiums. Brothers and sisters, this is a limited time opportunity. It is an amazing time to invest for the future, not only in yourselves, but of your children after you. We are inshallah ta'ala going to change the entire da'wah scene by demonstrating to the world what it means to be a Muslim living in the West.
Okay, there's a bunch of things to talk about here. First off, if you're an American, any American has any right to live anywhere. There's no such cities. That's a Christian city. There might be a city where mostly Christians live. There might be a city where mostly Muslims live, Dearborn, Michigan. There might be a city where mostly Jewish people live, Little Enclave in Brooklyn. All these things are possible. But you can't stop other people from living there. Now, I don't know that this group of people have stopped anybody, but do you think you'd be welcome there if you were a Jewish family? Do you think a Christian family would be welcome there? Do you think you'd be able to open up any other type of place of worship besides a mosque? You think 3 Christian families could come in and open up a church? Do you think the Jainists are going to be welcome over there? How's it going to go for, I don't know, gays or lesbians or the bis or whatever else? So this does represent I would say, a real divergence from what America is all about. And interestingly, Texas, almost 10 years ago, did pass a law banning Sharia law, which is obviously Islamic religious law, which dictates really over, it's a religious system and a political system over the people's lives who choose to be part of it. Lara Logan, who's an actual investigative journalist, she wrote this, breaking, Attorney General Ken Paxton announces investigation into Islamic mega city development in Plano, Texas. Epic, and that's what it is right there. Look, it is worth thinking about this stuff, guys, and it doesn't make you bigoted to say, okay, this group of people over here shouldn't have a city in the United States that is just for them, that won't be accommodating to other people. You want to have whatever your religious beliefs are, and you want to have your places of worship and your way of life and all of your things, that's fine. But we don't want to take the beautiful melting pot of America and turn it into the sort of segregated version of Europe. We do not want to do that. So we'll see what happens in Texas. I don't think they're going to put up for it, and we will see for sure. Guys, let's talk about G2 for a second. We'll have a RubinReport.locals.com community Q&A in just a sec. You guys know I'm all about logic and reason. Well, here's some logic. If your feet are killing you at the end of the day, you need better shoes. That's why I love G2 shoes by Gravity Defier. Unlike trendy sneakers, these are built on real shock-absorbing technology. Their patented VersoShock system absorbs impact, returns energy, and helps align your body so whether you're walking, running, or standing all day, it feels effortless. Right now, my listeners get 30% off orders over $120. Just text Rubin30 to 91888 or visit gdefy.com and use code Rubin30 at checkout. Use logic, choose comfort, G2. All right, community Q&A, here we go. Olaf says, dogs are pack animals. Would you ever get a buddy for Clyde? They really do entertain each other. I think we have some pictures of Clyde from this morning. There's Clyde right there. He's hanging out on the couch. He's taken over that one cushion because the kids have taken over pretty much everything else, and they've got their little dome there in the corner. I kind of like hanging out on the dome. It's pretty cool. Would we ever get another dog? No, not at this juncture. There's a lot of running around and food all over the place and messes and everything else. Clyde, he's a great dog. Many of you know the story. Got him right before lockdowns, or just as lockdowns were starting. Our dog before, Emma, had just passed away, 16 years old. We had just put her down. We didn't want to get another dog, but I heard they were going to kill all these dogs at shelters. I ran into a shelter. I didn't even have a mask. Saved him. He's with us. He's great. He's a good guard dog, but it's just a bit much. It's a bit much. I would love maybe in another time, or if we move to a farm one day, having more animals in general and maybe some more dogs. I don't know. We'll see. But right now, we're focusing on small humans. That's where we're at the moment. Elizabeth says, do you think leftists will understand that siding with jihadists is dangerous before they're thrown from a roof or as they're being thrown from a roof? Well, generally, as you're being thrown from a roof, you do start rethinking things. I mean, look, look, Queers for Palestine. And as I wrote in Don't Burn This Book, Queers for Palestine is very different than Palestine for queers. How do these queers, whatever that means, I don't know, are they gay or they're just they got a little of everything, or they got nothing, or whatever it is. But how do they think they would be treated by Hamas? So we picture the Hamas guys with the masks and the thing and the knife and the gun and the whole thing. Like, do you think that they would like you? So the problem with burying your head in the sand is that you just get buried a little bit low. You just get beheaded a little bit lower on the neck. It does not work. And this sort of what they call the red-green alliance, the alliance between the Islamists and the communists, and that's in essence what the queers are. It is not going to end well for you guys. Like, you can bow to them forever, and either you will live on your knees or you will be beheaded. It's as simple as that. Rich on the farm. I believe it was your birthday yesterday, Rich. Happy birthday. Says, have you noticed how disingenuous people often start with "so you think" as a way to mischaracterize your opinion and then criticize what they hallucinate? So when I was reading this question before, I like to take a quick glance. Before that immediately reminded me of one of Jordan Peterson's greatest hits. This is when Jordan and I were on tour. This is back in early 2018. He went on Kathy Newman's show in Britain, and this illustrates perfectly what you're laying out right there.
So you say, I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying
It's
there's a
bad.
crime, but you're just saying that's the way it is.
And
so
that
you're
you can
saying
rely on.
women, is that what you're saying? But you're saying basically, well, that's just a fact of
No,
life.
it's saying
Women
it
aren't
doesn't
necessarily
matter because I'm very, very, very careful with my words.
But you're saying it's not. You say women, so you're saying women are just more sensible. So you're saying give people equality of opportunity, that's fine. But still women aren't going to make it. That's what you're really
It
saying.
depends on your measurement technique.
To succeed is what you're saying.
Motion.
You're saying that women aren't intelligent enough to run these top companies?
No, I didn't say that at all.
You said that.
First off, Jordan has really had to glow up over the years too, huh? But that thing where Jordan, do you know anyone in the history of the world that speaks more clearly than Jordan? Does he do a lot of high-level ideas and sometimes you have to think about what he's saying for a sec? Yeah, but does he choose his words carefully and make a declarative statement every time something comes out of his mouth? The answer is obviously yes. So that's a perfect example of what you're talking about. There's this condescending way of, here, I said something, oh, so what you're saying is, and then it's never exactly what the person was saying. Leftists do this constantly. They have a lot of linguistic tricks. I think it's also why so many of them, when I play these clips of The View or some of these other shows with these women, they talk like Valley girls. There's something about that. Or even something about, why are all the men on CNN asexual? There's something about that a way of thinking that leads to weird mnemonic tricks and speech patterns and all of these things. I would prefer somebody who just speaks from the heart, tells you what they think. You go from there and see what happens, whether you agree with them or not. Shecky Green says, in my view, I smell a rat. How on earth does the most prolific Donald J. Trump hater anywhere get in this restricted chat room? So, of course, you're talking about this Signal story, and there's a lot to think about here. I really, really tried to cover it as cleanly and honestly as possible, fully admitting and accepting that if this was a Biden administration thing, I'd probably be going a little bit harder on it because Biden wasn't competent. Nobody around him was competent. The entire Biden administration actually was a scandal. And as the years go by, it will become more and more obvious. But as it pertains to this, there's this group chat. You've got JD, you've got Tulsi, you've got Marco, Pete Hegseth, you've got some of the primo all-stars of the administration in there. They're debating and discussing what their plans are as far as military strikes with the Houthis while we're doing it. So it wasn't some sort of secret that we were doing anything against the Houthis to get these trading ports open in the Red Sea. And then there's now some debate because Jeffrey Goldberg, who is in essence a leftist, he's an Atlantic Never Trumper guy, somehow got in the chat. It sounds like Mike Waltz, NSA Mike Waltz, put him in the chat, or whoever set up the chat through Mike Waltz, wasn't one of his guys did it. So was there an absolute moronic kind of boomer level screw up of who got in the chat? Yeah. Have we all accidentally texted the wrong person because you think you're texting one friend whose name is Frank and it turns out you texted the other Frank? Everyone's done it. Have you accidentally put someone in whatever? That doesn't excuse any of it, but that's just like a flat out obvious mistake. Now, I think you're arguing that perhaps there's something a little more nefarious there, like how did maybe someone else put him in Signal? Perhaps. I don't think anything's off the table, actually. The real question here is, if you read what was going on in the thread, which we showed you much of this week, it's like there's honest debate happening there. And JD's talking about how do we frame this properly for the American people who may not have an appetite for it and everything else. That's also the backdrop of the fact that the strikes all worked, right? The strikes, no Americans got hurt or anything else. And we sent a warning to the Houthis, you got to stop doing this. Okay, fine. The real question now is, what do you do about Mike Waltz, who apparently is the guy that let him in, or someone that he sets up his phone or whatever. And then I saw all sorts of people, and I got into a big debate on this on Piers Morgan, claiming that you're not allowed to use Signal for classified information. That is actually still a little unclear to me. We showed you the video yesterday of incoming CIA Director Ratcliffe saying that he was given a computer with Signal on it and told by the CIA people that he's allowed to communicate on there. So there's a lot of stuff here. So I don't think using Signal is illegal for these people. The question is, how long does the kind of scandal last? In some sense, and I'm just giving you the pure politic version of this. I'm not giving you like the pure legal version. In some sense, I think Trump just has to plow through this thing. Plow through. Waltz did something stupid. Trump has to decide if he wants to fire him or not. That seems fairly obvious, again, unless something really weird happened. But beyond that, I think you just keep moving forward. Nothing in that chat was anything different than what these people are saying publicly. It showed thoughtful policy and debate, and that's all good. Crafty Barb says, how do we get out of this mess? I'm not sure which mess you're talking about, Crafty Barb, but it seems like we're in less messes than we were, say, 6 months ago, right? Like, there's some stuff. The Signal thing is something. Ireland's got some stuff going on. There's some problems all over the world. But like right now, how do you get yourself out of this mess? How about stand up straight with your shoulders back, tell people what you think, fight for what you believe in, live in a place with like-minded people so you can build great things together, build a family, do that kind of stuff. I think that is pretty solid generally, even without knowing what specific mess you're talking about. Susan says, less educated people can be controlled and paid less. So is that why you allowed 12 to 20 million illegally into our country? I think what you're referencing there, Susan, is we played a clip of Sunny Hostin. God bless that racist loon, Sunny Hostin, on the Don Lemon podcast. And she was basically saying, we need public education because if we don't have public education, then everyone's going to be stupid. Of course, never referencing the fact that test scores are going down. Kids can't read at 5th grade levels until they're in 8th grade in certain places. Like there's so many, and they're being taught all the wrong things and everything else. But of course, you're completely right. Everything they say can just be peeled back so easily. And it's just pure nonsense. Like, okay, so you're right. And right. So you're connecting it to the immigration thing. So it's like, all right, let all these people in and they'll work our jobs. Then they'll be replaced by robots. Then they'll go to state schools and they'll get government handouts. And what will we have at the end? While at the same time, you told them that they moved to a systemically racist place, Sonny. It's strange, Sonny, because you aren't going anywhere because you're making an awful lot of money telling people how terrible it is here. Let's talk about crowd health, and then we got more questions on the other side. Hey guys, let's talk about something that drives me up the wall, health insurance. I mean, is there anything more frustrating? That's exactly why I'm excited to tell you about Crowd Health. This isn't your typical health insurance. It's a smarter, better way to handle healthcare through crowdfunding. Instead of funneling your hard-earned cash to big insurance companies that seem to make a profit by not paying your bills, Crowd Health flips the script. They're shaking things up by cutting out the middleman and making healthcare straightforward and affordable. So how does it work? With Crowd Health, you're joining a health insurance alternative that's all about real support. For just $175 a month for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you get access to a community ready to step up when you need it most. We're talking about telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and tons of other perks. No doctor networks holding you back. The best part, you're part of the crowd, a group of folks like you and me who pitch in to cover each other's unexpected medical costs. It's simple, it's human, and it's a game changer. Here's the deal. Let Crowd Health help you with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code DAVE at joincrowdhealth.com. Oh, and a quick note, Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com. Code DAVE. Trust me, your wallet and your sanity will thank you. Tarp says, what's brown and sticky? Who selected the questions today? Joseph, what is brown and sticky? A Jello pudding pop. It's delicious and it's brown and it's sticky. Theo, do you want one? NY 53813. Lake and Riley was white. Does Tiffany Cross care? Oh, well, what you're referencing is that CNN clip that we showed you with Scott Jennings getting into it with this girl, Tiffany Cross. And of course, what she's basically arguing is that Trump is racist because, we're deporting people and some of these people happen to be brown. And she said something like, oh, and if they were taking white babies away from their mothers, we'd be up in arms. And it's like, they're not taking brown babies away. There were no brown babies put on those planes that went to El Salvador. But then he brought up the point, Scott Jennings brought up the point, well, how about we care about Laken Riley, et cetera? Laken Riley, young girl, happened to be white, murdered by an illegal immigrant. Well, let's put it this way. If she was black, more people would know her name. I think we know that much. We did live through BLM, did we not? But that's the sad thing. Like, if you don't really have, if your principles are all connected to whatever the political hot button thing is of the day, you're going to take any position and over time seem crazy. That basically sums up the modern progressive. If you have principles, like actual principles, then you can hold them regardless of the political trends. And it's one of the reasons that Scott Jennings is just doing a bang up job over on CNN. I honestly think they might be like it's like they're all being punked right now. They're like, what idiot? Can we get another idiot to sit with this guy? Because those are the clips that go viral, even if it makes our network look bad. Marcus says, doesn't Jasmine Crockett's gaslighting remind you of that other relay runner who hit the one in the head with the baton and then claimed it was an accident? Do we have video of this? This is incredible. I don't know how we didn't show this on the show earlier in the week. Look at this. Look at this. That's not how that's not how you do the relay. Everyone knows the relay. You're running, and then the person in front of you is running, and they back here, and then you don't hit them over the baton. That's like a perfect visual example of what Jasmine Crockett is. But that's what all the Democrats are at this point. That's actually a great example of just like, that's her in AOC, right? AOC was running in front of her. She couldn't take it. She has now banged AOC in the head with the crazy baton. AOC is off going that way. She's hanging out with Bernie for a little bit. But watch out. AOC could have a comeback. She can get a bigger baton and smack Crockett. And that will be that. All right, one more for you, and then I got to get on a plane to New York. Izzy says, what is the best dessert and why is it ice cream? Well, Izzy, you are absolutely right. It is ice cream. I don't do much dessert these days, although it was Connor's birthday. We went out. You know what we did? You people will appreciate this. So, Connor loves Chili's. Everyone knows it. Millions of people across the world know that Connor loves Chili's. We told him all day long that we were going to Chili's, and he was so excited. He dressed up in his Chili's outfit. It was the whole thing, and we were talking about the salad bar and the wings and the baby back ribs and the sauce all over your face. And then Phoenix said to me, Dave, the Rubin Report's a professional operation. Can we do a little bit better than Chili's? And we took him to my favorite Mexican joint in Miami. It's called Coco in Coconut Grove. And we got did we have any pictures of that? Do we have some pictures of those steaks? Yeah, throw up a picture. We got 2 Wagyu tomahawks that were just, and we had some tequila, and it was a good night. But connect that to dessert. He did blow out a candle on a churro. However, ice cream, yes. I don't eat much dessert. Ice cream, you give me a little mint chocolate cookie, I'm a happy guy. Maybe once a month. That's it. Trying to keep it clean around here. All right, guys, Gutfeld, the #1 show in late night tonight. And then I believe I'm on Fox and Friends tomorrow morning. Not sure what time that'll be. They kind of adjust you as the day goes by. And Jesse Waters tomorrow evening, couple podcasts during the day, and we'll be sure to get a bunch of stuff up. Thank you. Adios.
The other bodies that it affects is the media. So, media takes money from big pharma, from big tech, from government. And it is a huge machine, really, that is arrayed against the individual, and it makes it incredibly hard to fight. We are trying to fight it, and it's all impossible almost to know where to start. But ultimately, you have to start somewhere, and you have to hope that what is happening in the US will have an impact. I mean, we're in a very interesting position now because it's almost like at least some elements of press in the UK, they don't know what to do, right. Because they can no longer maintain the lie. Like, the truth has got out and the public are not stupid. The public know the truth. And the more the media refuse to even acknowledge that there is another narrative, and actually that narrative is blessed with truth and authenticity in the way that the COVID narrative was not. Yeah. What do you do about that?
All
All right, so this is a conference obviously about human flourishing and freedom and individual rights and all that. You have been talking about COVID and how it affected this country for quite some time. We sort of left COVID behind. We don't talk about it anymore. There was never a mea culpa. There was never a real postmortem on what happened. So where are you at with COVID and what we should be looking back at and maybe reevaluating?
I mean, I think that's such an important point because the fact we don't talk about it, I just find staggering. So, I believe, so I'm Jewish by heritage. And honestly, I think what happened during COVID went beyond any reasonable way a democracy should function. I mean, I query whether the UK, the US for that period could even call themselves democracies when you see what happened in terms of, the denial of rights, the censorship, the coercion. So to think that we've moved on from that, that was done, that was yesterday, and here we are again in, these healthy functioning democracies, I just think is a complete fallacy. So we set up, so I'm the founder of a group called Us for Them. We set up right at the beginning of the pandemic to try and force schools to open in the UK. And what had been a single issue campaign around school openings very quickly became a campaign for human flourishing, for freedom, for a way of life, for kids, but then, to be honest, just as much for adults. And we won't stop talking about what happened because I firmly believe that until we have a proper truth and reconciliation exercise, we're not going to be able to move on. And, we're looking across the pond to you guys now with envy because we don't have that change of leadership here. We are still mired in the dark days of, an authoritarian mindset, really, which started in the pandemic and hasn't really stopped since.
So you're looking at us and basically hoping that Bobby Kennedy at HHS is really able to uncover some of the corruption and why did we force these mRNA vaccines through and everything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the pandemic response was riddled with conflicts, and many of those have not been given any public airing. So, one of the projects we're working on now is a project to unearth and expose some of the conflicts. And, I think I'm quite versed in this. I'm a lawyer by training and think I'm quite versed in this, particularly after being completely immersed in it for 5 years. And, we discovered just a few months ago another batch of undisclosed conflicts of running into the tunes of the hundreds of millions of pounds. This is the UK, but people on key government committees in the UK who hadn't thought fit to declare these conflicts. And the whole thing is just so incredibly murky and still is here.
Are you worried that even if we uncover some of the corruption, which some of it already is being uncovered even before Bobby has really taken over, that it's across every vertical of society, right? So there's the education layer, there's obviously the pharmaceutical layer, there's people got fired that were in private businesses too. Like there's just so many things that sort of is the insurmountable problem, that to point to something and say, this is how we have to fix it is almost impossible.
It is. And I think particularly given, of course, the other bodies that it affects is the media. So, media takes money from big pharma, from big tech, from government. And it is a huge machine, really, that is arrayed against the individual, and it makes it incredibly hard to fight. We are trying to fight it, and it's all impossible almost to know where to start. But ultimately, you have to start somewhere, and you have to hope that what is happening in the US will have an impact. I mean, we're in a very interesting position now because it's almost like at least some elements of press in the UK, they don't know what to do, right? Because they can no longer maintain the lie. Like the truth has got out and the public are not stupid. The public know the truth. And the more the media refuse to even acknowledge that there is another narrative, and actually that narrative is blessed with truth and authenticity in the way that the COVID narrative was not. What do you do about that?
Is part of the problem here also that people just don't want to think about COVID anymore? So as horrible as some of the things that the government did and the media did and whatever anyone lived through personally or had to, not go to grandma's funeral or get kicked out of a job, whatever all that might be. People just don't want to think about that anymore. It was so much part of our lives for 3 years that they don't want to look back, even if it is to fix it.
I think absolutely. And, it needs a rebrand, really, doesn't it? And I think we need to stop using the term COVID, because it was never really about COVID. It was about freedom. It was about democracy. It was about childhood and the denial of all those things. And I think the other huge elephant in the room is that, here, as in the US, many people were duped at some point or another, whether that's because you were a parent that went along with school closures. I mean, I put my then 6-year-old in front of a screen for 6 hours a day, to the point that she would be coming out of homeschooling, remote learning, saying, "Mum, my eyes hurt, my eyes hurt." So, I did that. Obviously, the vaccine is a whole other layer of, I think we have millions of people who either have taken it themselves and feel maybe concerned but don't want to acknowledge that, or who have seen friends and family who believe they may have been injured by it. And there's this kind of omerta of silence, isn't there? No one really wants to acknowledge the very serious and huge nature of the lies.
One of my theories was the reason that they were going so hard on getting kids vaxxed, even though there was no evidence that kids needed vaccines, is that it was the pressure that it would then put on the parent. That if you were a parent and you got your kid vaxxed, you could never look back and say, boy, it's on me if now my kid has myocarditis or some other neurological disease or whatever it might be. Like that's a bridge too far for a parent to have to really think about.
It is. And to have to acknowledge that you did that, and that you may have not had all the evidence, you may have, actively shunned some of the evidence because people just didn't want to hear, did they? So, how you get over that is hard, but I think we are, I am very hopeful that Bobby and Jay, I'm very lucky to work quite closely at one point with Jay during the campaign. And and you just have to hope that this will start filtering here. But, I struggle to see how that's going to happen within the current administration here, because they are so, so opposed to, it seems, some of those values of freedom and free speech.
One of the things that I'm most proud of over these years, because I did not go crazy with COVID, really, and I'm proud to say I'm not vaxxed, and my employees are not vaxxed, and I thought it was just insane that I could force my employees to get vaxxed to work for me. It's completely psychotic. But when COVID started, I had Jay Badenoch on very early, and because he was a little more calm about everything and sober about everything, that gave me the room to do that. And the fact that he now is going to head up NIH is just absolutely incredible.
It is.
And it's something he could have never imagined even a year ago.
No, it will make for a great Netflix.
Yeah, it really will.
No, it's fantastic. And we wrote in about 2022, myself and my co-founder wrote a book called The Children's Inquiry, and we interviewed Jay at some length for that. And he was fantastic. And he, what he said, and I sure he wouldn't mind me saying it, because in the book he said, it was a form of child sacrifice. What happened, usually we don't sacrifice children to protect adults, but with the pandemic, you don't even have to look to the vaccines for that. School closures, like that is literally what we did. We shut children's lives down for years so that adults could feel safer. I mean, it's morally abhorrent. And to see, I think most people now would accept, or at least in the UK, I think the school closure argument has been won. I don't think schools will close like that again, certainly not for an illness that is not very dangerous for children themselves. But really, that is the only bit of the argument that I feel has been won. We are nowhere here with free speech. We are nowhere with the vaccines. And in fact, we have the COVID inquiry. We have a big public inquiry happening in the UK at the moment. I say at the moment, it's years, this public inquiry. And
do you think anything will come out of it that will be substantive?
Worse than that, it is so far, we're about halfway through it. It is proving to be a Orwellian exercise in how one ingrains lies into the history books. So this inquiry, unbelievably, has started from the premise, which you and I know is a completely flawed premise, that the vaccines were safe and effective. So it's not looking at that. It said, the vaccines were tremendously safe, tremendously effective. They were, I think, at one point, the lead lawyer for the inquiry called the vaccine program the Promised Land. So they've started from that basis.
A vaccine that's literally not a vaccine.
So that would be a heresy. I mean, they have not let any witness who would say anything close to that. They have not even let testimony of those injured by the vaccines be heard directly. You know, they have acknowledged there are vaccine injuries, but it has been very gated. So it's dystopian, because you're going to have this very expensive belts and braces public inquiry, which is going to be held out as a definitive record of truth. And it is a lie. It is founded and grounded in lies.
Where do you think the COVID conversation fits within the broader sort of concept of ARC? Because it hits sort of all of the important points that ARC is talking about individualism first and liberty and freedom and all of those things, and building societies this way instead of this way. But it's not something that is being discussed sort of in every panel down there and everything else.
No, it's not. But in a way, I guess it was just I was going to say small example, but of course it wasn't. It was a very important example. And perhaps it was the first time that to those of us who had not been politicized. So I was in no way a political being. I was
welcome to the party.
Yeah, very lucky, I guess, that politics had never directly impacted my life in a way that meant I felt I had to stand up and scream. And I think it was the first time that many of us realized how fragile the concepts being discussed here this week really are. So we talk about liberty and freedom and free speech as if they are our God-given right, because for many of us, that's all we have ever known, or all we ever had known until 2020. And suddenly they all disappeared. And I think it has left many of us. I mean, I do not believe the UK is a democracy, at least not in the way I would have understood that term in 2018, 2019. It's not. You know, we are using democracy to fight against itself. We're using democratic terms. You know, we must censor the public space to protect the public space. I mean, that makes no sense, does it? So I think the COVID period is very relevant, because it really brought the concepts being discussed here now to a wider base, because so many of us were impacted.
Those who give up liberty for safety deserve neither. I'm definitely not the person that came up with that. Well, let's finish with this then. So as you're sitting here with ARC, and as these ideas have woken up someone like you must be hopeful that your other countrymen are waking up too, and that even if the inquiries look corrupt and everything else, that, like, what's the hopeful version of the future?
Yeah, the hopeful version of the future is it unites people who would not have found each other, let alone been united, to create a new force, whether that is at grassroots. You have parents on school boards, you have this more active, actually I want to know what my kid is being taught in her classes, because I don't want her being indoctrinated with, whatever it is, gender ideology or, net zero ideology, like whatever it is. Or at a higher level, you have new political forces come together. We're seeing that a bit in the UK with the rise of, reform. I hope they won't be the only party. Hopefully we break the two-party diktat that has been very corrosive, I think, of democracy in the last years.
Ironically, I have a bit of a cough, but can I shake your hand?
I would love you to shake my hand.
Thank you.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.